Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend. Back Deku fanfic with another fiction. What if Keigo and Touya went for a spring break with Niblings? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Keigo knew Touya hated having guests over. It was nothing personal, just the fact that it meant having their whole routine disrupted and upset all the balances of work, school, meals, and family time that Touya kept himself sane with. Keigo also knew Touya adored their nieces and nephews more than anything. In some cases, much more than he adored the parents of said Niblings. So though Touya put on a worry-free front at taking 3 of the said Niblings in for spring break, Keigo knew he was clawing apart with conflict inside. "Are you sure about this, Firecracker?" he asked, as they lay in bed together the night before. "We can always ask Ray and Inji. I'm sure they'd help. They already have 2 of Rumi and Fayumi's oldest. And I don't trust Inji to look after Fueri." His mate's lovely blue eyes darkened, and Keigo had to agree the thought of their tufty-haired niece staying with Inji was terrifying. So they decided to go with it. How hard could taking care of 7 children be? A fucking nightmare, thought Touya, roughly 12 hours later. Yumiko and Yukio arrived first, both amped up like they'd been struck by lightning. Yumiko was wearing those goggles some younger kids wore in place of glasses, her twin brother having tied his long red-tipped lop ears behind his head like an awful furry bandana. Upon entering the living room and batting away their parents, Yumiko immediately launched herself at Hawu, shouting a battle cry as they tried to turn the newly vacuumed living room into a dojo. Touya pinched the bridge of his nose, telling them off and throwing them into the backyard after Hawu knocked over a lamp, trying to dodge a roundhouse kick to the face. Momoko dragged Yukio to her room to show him her Lego sets, and Takara went back to pestering Keigo about dinner. At least Touya was happy to note Hayato seemed to remember how to behave around guests. The snowy-haired boy was quietly reading from his place on the couch. Fueri showed up last, in a black and white polka dot dress that gave Touya the distinct impression of one of those creepy horror movie dolls. As usual, her black streaked ivory hair and dusty red eyes bordered the careful line between disparaged Victorian child and drowned rat. Hayato looked up in interest as his younger cousin ignored Keigo and Touya's attempts to greet her, instead climbing onto the sofa and greeting him timidly. Touya rubbed his temples, and Keigo sighed, leaning over to kiss his Omega's forehead. "Come on, Starlight. Take it easy." I know, Touya breathed, closing his eyes and letting out a bone-deep sigh. Keigo pressed against him, letting out a wave of comforting pheromones, easing some of the tension in his Omega's brow. "You're wearing the earrings I got you," Keigo observed, letting out a happy chirp. Touya snorted, nodding. "Of course you'd notice, you stupid bird." "Ouch," Keigo complained, and when Touya looked at him, he was grinning like an idiot, eyes sparkling. Shaking his head, Touya leaned up, pressing a kiss against those soft, beautiful lips and leaning in. "Seriously, guys," Hayato said, interrupting them with a disgusted expression. He was covering Fueri's eyes with a hand, as she squirmed in confusion. "Stop being weird around Wary." "Yeah," Takara said emphatically, from where he'd been slipping on his sneakers to head outside with his siblings. "Y'all gross." "Love isn't gross. I love your father very much, and I love you too," Touya chided, stepping back and brushing white bangs from his forehead. "Now, go get your big sister and Yukio, and tell them to come outside with everyone else so your dad can make lunch." "Fine." Takara loped off down the hall, brown wings fluttering as he shouted for Momo. "I'm making lunch?" Keigo asked, surprised. "Yes," Touya informed him, kissing his cheek. "It's been forever since I've been able to spend some good time outdoors with the kiddos. Now go be a good house husband, and try not to burn the house down." "Yes, ma'am," agreed Keigo, earning him a light smack on the shoulder before Touya headed out with the other kids. He immediately felt his mind go blank as he registered the fact that Hawu had a sword. A long, wooden sword. He vaguely recalled something about Keigo informing him of Takoyami coming over to train, and wondered if they'd left it behind. Either way, Hau had a sword now. Yumiko had built a pyre, and Touya had come out just in time to see the first flames appear. This was going to be a very, very long weekend. They managed to get through the rest of the afternoon without too much trouble. Keigo managed not to kill everyone in his attempts to cook, and Yumiko and Hau were prevented from setting anything else on fire. And it only took getting bit once for them to stop bothering Fury, though Touya was now convinced that their youngest niece was actually part piranha. It would explain why she and Hayato got along. As dinner approached, Keigo whisked the kids away for a few rounds of Mario Kart, kissing Touya on the cheek and earning a grateful smile in return. Dinner was tricky. Yukio was vegetarian. Hau hated anything without meat. Takara had Touya's incurable sweet tooth. Hayato hated the texture of their prefecture's water and would only drink Propel, and Fury refused to eat anything she deemed mushy, and the rest was rarely eaten without first dumping a full bottle of hot sauce on top. In short, Touya had worked himself to the bone trying to figure out what to make that would satisfy everyone's preferences, without being twice as much food than was reasonable. The end result took about 4 straight hours of prep, and he blanched to think they'd go through this again for tomorrow's dinner. After a Studio Ghibli movie marathon, they finally got the kids showered and redressed, at which point Touya practically collapsed at his alpha's side, completely exhausted. "You're doing great," Keigo reassured, as he dropped to his mate's side, smoothing kisses into soft white hair and against pale scar-dappled skin. "Get some rest, firecracker. You've earned it." Touya did. Touya blinked open his eyes at the feeling of small hands nudging his shoulder, sitting up and fumbling to click on the bedside lamp. Looking up, he was surprised to see Hayato standing before them. It was a long time since their oldest had crawled into the nest after a bad night of sleep. But with all the stress of rooming with cousins, he supposed it wasn't impossible. "Hayato, what's wrong, baby bird?" Keigo asked blearily, having woken up from the shuffling. Hayato shook his head. "It's not me, it's Fury." He gestured behind him, and Touya startled at the small girl behind him, who was sniffling, large red eyes wet with tears. "What's wrong?" he asked, kicking off the covers, ready to stand up. Was she sick? Hungry? Were the others picking on her, if unintentionally again? "She wants her mom and dad," Hayato said, and Touya blinked. Oh, fuck, of course. He'd been ignoring Tenko's calls out of habit, as the fellow Omega usually only called if it was to get on Touya's nerves. He'd assumed if it was serious, Natsuo would ring him instead. Shit, why was he such an idiot? Of course Fury was probably feeling scared, trapped in a house with people she didn't trust. Rubbing his temples, he nodded, standing. "Right. Of course, sorry honey. Do you want me to call them?" Fury whispered something in Hayato's ear, and he nodded. "She says yes." "All right, of course, come on, it's okay. Honey, we're not mad," Touya pleaded, feeling like a piece of shit when Fury let out another sob. He put a gentle hand on her back, guiding her down the hall in his fluffy blue bathrobe, Hayato trailing behind sullenly. Unplugging his phone from the kitchen counter, he dialed Tenko's number, praying it picked up. On the third ring, the call was accepted, and a familiar breathy rasp hissed at him through the speaker. "What the fuck do you want at 3 in the morning, you goddamn son of a—" "Fury wants to talk to you," he interrupted, hoping that would be enough to keep this from turning into a shouting match. They already had plenty of those. "Oh," Tenko stopped. "Where is she?" "Hang on." Touya glanced down at the shaking girl, then elected to put it on speakerphone, handing it over so she could clutch it to her chest. "Mama?" Fury choked out, voice soft and raspy. "Hey, baby, what's wrong?" Tenko asked, worry in their tone. "I want to go home," Fury choked out, letting out a sob. "I want you and Dad. I don't want to be with my cousins. It's too loud. I wanna—" Hey, Natsuo broke in, voice warm. Come on, breathe, Snowdust. You're okay. Can you tell us what happened? I want to go home, Fury whined again, rocking on her heels. Hayato tugged at Touya's bathrobe, and Touya pressed a kiss to his forehead, nodding. Go back to bed. We'll be okay. Hayato sauntered off sleepily, as Keigo and Touya stood at their niece's sides. If we talk, and you still don't want to stay, we'll come right over and pick you up, Natsuo promised. I want to see if we can find a compromise though, okay? Do you know what that means? Mei-chan, Fury sniffled, nodding. Auntie Rumi said, she said it's like you and Mama married, even though Mama has a flat ass. There was a pause before Tenko let out an indignant squawk, and Keigo fell over laughing with a wheeze, earning him a look from Touya that immediately drained the color from Mihiro's face. He could stare death in the face without flinching, but still nothing terrified him more than his angry Omega. Well, Natsuo cut in, trying desperately to move forward. Your mother has many other great qualities, even if… Natsuo, you're going to be sleeping on the couch for a week if you finish that sentence, Tenko threatened, sounding equal parts flustered and unimpressed. Honey, compromise is like how I agree to let your Aunt Rumi stay alive when she says that because Aunt Fayumi loves her. And I don't want to make Fayumi sad. We don't want you to be sad, but we don't want you to have to leave behind all your cousins. Okay? Fury nodded, sniffling again. Yeah. Tell me what's going on, Tenko urged softly. What can we do to help? Fury burst out, hand flying to scratch at her jaw in a nervous tick. Touya nearly reached out to gently still the motion, as he sometimes did when Hau used to pull out his feathers in moments of stress, but stopped last minute. He wasn't sure if the young girl would react well to the touch. Hau and Miko tried to put me on a big stick and set me on fire, she started. Cause of the frog gods 'cause they would be angry, so I bit M. And then Yukio called me a snake, and then I says I'm not a snake 'cause those are lame. But they didn't listen, so then we had to go inside and Uncle Keigo tried to poison us. Hawks did what? Tenko cut in, voice low and terrifying in a way that reminded Touya equally of his old boss, and not his brother's sad little mate. He tried to poison me, she yelped again. I made lunch, Keigo cried, cheeks flushed. I didn't. But it was so bad, Fury argued, and Touya covered his mouth to hide his smirk. He could hear Natsuo cackling in the background. I don't cook that terrible, Keigo pleaded, sounding pained. Yes you do, Fury accused. Daddy is way better than you. Keigo stared at the ground, looking downright heartbroken. Touya patted his back sympathetically, shaking his head. You tried your best. Maybe Auntie Touya can take over the rest of the cooking, suggested Tenko, seeing as their useless alpha was still cackling from somewhere in the background. Would that make it better? Is that okay, Touya? Matsuo asked, having recovered. Talia's eye twitched. Having Keigo cook lunch had been his plan for keeping his aspirin intake to under 8 a day. But, yeah, he agreed, sighing. Raindrop, is that okay? Tenko asked, voice having gone from renowned serial killer back to concerned Mama Bear. Fury hummed, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. Will you be back on Monday? Of course. I promise, Natsuo assured soothingly. We'll even get you a snow globe for your collection, okay? Since you've been so brave on your own. Okay? Fury shivered slightly. I don't want to be set on fire again, Mama. Aunt Touya and Uncle Keigo will make sure no one sets you on fire. Got it? You're safe, baby, Tenko reassured. Dad and I love you so much. Fury sniffed. I want to sleep in the nest at home. You could sleep in the nest with me and Touya if you want, Keigo offered, and she shook her head. Doesn't smell like Mama. I want to go home. Keigo grimaced. Touya yawned. After around a half an hour more of back and forth, Fury finally agreed to stay until Monday morning as planned, and they hung up the phone, Keigo taking Fury back to bed. She'd stopped speaking to them again. But Touya didn't put as much weight into words as Keigo did, so he didn't mind. Finally, they crawled back into bed, soft and heavy wings draping over Touya's shoulder like the most gentle weighted blanket. And he was able to sleep again. When Touya woke up to clanging, he hoped for a moment it was the kids, and that gotten to sleep in. He was wrong. Of course. Softly slipping out from underneath Keigo, Touya shuffled down the hallway, blinking bleary eyes towards the faint sounds of muttering. The kitchen light was on when he walked in, the pie Touya had made for Sunday dessert on the counter. The pie which had the cling wrap cover thrown off, and was now noticeably only half there. Now frozen in place, eyes wide, stood Yumiko and Hawu, hands and faces covered in red pie filling. "What are you two doing?" Touya asked. "Too tired for any of this." "All of it. Literally anything more than lying dead on the floor, preferably with Keigo snuggled up next to him." Yumiko started, shuffling nervously as she looked between Touya and the half-eaten pie. Finally, Hawu broke in. It was Sukuna. Hawu had brought home the class pet for the break, a betta fish named Sukuna who appeared 5 seconds away from keeling over and dying. Hawu had apparently been under the impression the poor creature had some hidden quirk or talent to justify the class fascination with it, and had been severely disappointed to discover it was simply an ordinary fish. As if to make up for this, Momoko had instantly emotionally attached herself to it, something that had given Touya an anxiety attack given the creature's near-death aura. "The fish ate the pie," Touya said, unimpressed. Yumiko and Hawu nodded fervently. "And the red pie filling on your face?" Touya questioned. "He ran in and ate the pie and then threw a bunch at us cause he was too small to eat all of it," Yumiko said, now confident in their story and determined to stick to it. Hawu blinked at her with respect, before nodding emphatically. "We were gonna fight him off, but he went away before you got here." Touya pinched the bridge of his nose. "Hawu, go to your room. Both of you, no pie after dinner tonight." Hawu's mouth dropped open in shock. Yumiko gasped. "What? Why?" Touya just looked back at them, eyebrow raised, until they sullenly walked back down the hallway and to their room. "And wash your face," he called, as an afterthought. "I don't want pie filling on the sheets." Touya waited until the bedroom door finally clicked shut, before letting his head fall into his hands, a tired groan escaping. Glancing at the clock, let him know it had been about 3 hours since he'd gone back to bed for the first time, barely time for any meaningful rest. And now there was a kitchen to clean. By the time everything was cleaned and put away, it was 4 a.m. So with a sigh, Touya decided to just get an early start on breakfast. Rubbing his eyes, he poured another cup of tea, sighing heavily at the familiar smell of ginger steam. He'd given up coffee when he was pregnant with Momoko, having heard something from Fayumi about the caffeine being damaging to the baby, and now he couldn't drink it at all anymore. Back in his old days with the league, he remembered going 3-4 days without sleep, just running on adrenaline and a need for stimuli. Now, he could barely go 20 hours without feeling ready to collapse to the ground and just stay there. It was too early to let his thoughts spiral into the territory they were going, and it left him worse off trying to remind himself that Keigo would be horrified to hear any of what he was thinking. It didn't make him feel any less useless. It didn't keep old thoughts from sliding in like paint chip fumes to perch on his shoulder, hissing static reminders that he would never be good enough, never be able to be a hero, to get his revenge, to support his family. No matter what the end goal was, Touya always felt only 4 steps from failure. And it wasn't what he needed at 5 in the morning, half dead and desperately missing the warmth of his lover. At 8, the kids had all managed to jostle each other awake, scrambling down to the kitchen and demanding to be fed. Shortly after came Touya's husband, hair a mess and sporting pale pink pro-hero hemoglobin pajamas, They'd been part of a matching hemoglobin and uravity set, given to them as a Christmas gift. "Hey, Starburst," he said, sitting down and reaching out a hand to lace their fingers together, as Yumiko stole another bacon strip off of Takara's plate. "Hey, Bird Brain," Touya greets tiredly, managing a small smile for the love of his life. Keigo let out a happy coo, closing his eyes. "Our idiot children snuck down and ate the pie I made for dinner tonight at 3 in the morning." He gave Keigo a look. "I blame you for this. When I was a kid, I never pulled this sort of fuckery." Keigo winced. "Sorry." Touya huffed, but sat a plate in front of his alpha. Pancakes topped with strawberries cut to look like small hearts. Keigo happy chirped, eyes sparkling. "God, I still can't believe I'm married to such an amazing cook." Touya considered the compliment. "Well, it's an improvement from when you called me a sexy Gordon Ramsay, so I'll take it." "What are you having?" Keigo asked curiously, as Touya moved to sit next to his mate at the counter. Touya pulled the slice of cherry pie closer to himself, grabbing a fork and stabbing into it viciously. "Cereal." "Okay, who's next?" Much to Tauya's chagrin, the only wholesome family activity the children could all agree on was a karate tournament out on the lawn, with Fuwari and Hayato set, as the judges Hayato refused to participate, and no one wanted to get bitten. Yumiko was winning. "His turn," Momoko piped up, shoving Yukio forwards onto Momo's repurposed gymnastics mat to square off against his twin sister. "No, Yukio protested. "I'm not gonna hit a girl." "Boo," Hau cheered. "Lame. I hit girls all the time and they're super strong. I just win because I'm better," he declared proudly. In some weird-ass version of feminism Touya wasn't sure whether to scold or praise him for. Yumiko kicked Hau in the face. "You lose." Touya put his head in his hands. Eventually, he slipped out to get started on lunch, Keigo taking over watching the kids for the time being. He was surprised when, about 10 minutes into getting everything set up in the kitchen, Hayato slipped inside, pulling up a chair and laying his head on the bar. "What's wrong?" Touya asked cautiously, noting the reserved expression in his little owl's eyes. Hayato sighed. "It's too hot outside." Touya raised an eyebrow, knowing that was a lie. Hayato rarely got very hot, most likely some minor form of ice quirk, like Touya had, keeping him from overheating. He didn't call his pup out on it, though, deciding it wasn't that important. "You want some iced tea?" Hayato nodded, not saying anything as Touya got him a cup of green tea. Searching through the fridge, he pulled out one of the fancy ice cube mold trays that Hayato loved, and added dolphin-shaped ice cubes to the glass. Hayato gave a soft smile, and it was the brightest thing Touya had ever seen. "Thanks," he muttered, then looked up. "Can I have a hug?" Touya's heart melted. Their oldest had always been the most touch-resistant, especially as he got older. Touya nodded, sweeping behind the counter to wrap Hayato in a warm embrace. "Of course, Lil Owl." Hayato squeezed in tight, letting out a sigh, laying there for a beat before pulling back again, back into the waves. Touya went back to cooking, waiting for Hayato to speak again. "Everyone always thinks jellyfish are pack animals because they travel in blooms a lot," Hayato said. Touya hummed. "Blooms. That's what a pack is called. But they also call it a swarm, sometimes." "Or a smack," Hayato informed him, hand moving to rest on his chin as he looked down at the counter. "I wonder if it's 'cause they smack each other with their tentacles. Kinda like Momo and Hau and I with our wings." Touya snorted, smiling softly to himself as he turned on the oven. "They aren't pack animals. They just end up grouping up because the currents pull them all together. But they aren't territorial either. They just float with each other when they all group up." He paused, bringing the glass back to his mouth. "Everyone thinks that jellies have some kind of social structure, like how we have alphas and omegas and big kids and little kids and everything. But they don't. They don't know what it is. They're just there, and they're just floating. Is that a good thing? Touya asked honestly, handing Hayato a napkin. Hayato tilted his head, considering. I don't know. I think it'd be lonely to be floating with a bunch of people, but I can't reach out. I want to be a part of the world. But I don't like having to constantly figure out what everyone secretly means. I just want to float sometimes. Maybe what you need to do is find people who can let you do both, Touya suggested. So you can float, but you won't be lonely. I know, Hayato frowned, peering at the floating ice cubes in his glass. But even if they let me be me, they're still all dolphins, and they want to play and make bubble rings and stuff. And then I'm left behind floating. He sighed, hugging himself. I don't want to feel like I'm not a part of my own family, but it's so loud, all the time. And sometimes I want everyone to shut up, but I don't want to make them act quiet just because I'm around, because they have to be quiet everywhere else. Touya ruffled Hayato's hair, smiling softly as Hayato wrinkled his nose. Guess what, baby? What? That's perfectly normal, Touya promised. We all need a break sometimes. Dad loves being a hero, but he needs breaks sometimes to be a hero. No one expects you to be one thing all the time. If you change one day, we'll all still love you. Promise. Hayato didn't respond, only nodding. Touya sighed, wondering if Hayato could tell he had no clue what he was saying. He'd only begun having a real family the same time Hayato became a part of it. Whatever he'd learned from Keigo and from years taking care of their pups. He'd learned how to be a parent to Fayumi and Natsuo before he was ever old enough to know what he was doing. Learned to act mature without knowing any of the realizations and life lessons that made the word mean something. And now Touya was an actual parent, and only now did he finally feel like a child, still trying to figure out how to organize his emotions like he'd organized the cupboards at 7 years old. He was so tired, and it still only felt as if the day was finally beginning. Takara, stop trying to trick Yukio into stepping on your Legos. The day. Yukio, please stop eating the Monopoly money. Went by. Yumiko, how who? Stop wrestling right next to where Fuwari is coloring. Minute by minute. Fuwari, are you bleeding? Don't squeeze out more blood from the cut. Until finally. Momoko, you can't put cobwebs on Fuwari's arm like in the cat books. You're going to get a spider bite. Finally. Keigo, get the broom. I can't see it. Oh my god, where did it go? It was over. Touya had done it. He'd made lunch and dinner, gotten the kids through the day, and put them to bed. He'd set out fires, broken up arguments, picked up Legos, cleaned up Monopoly games, put band-aids over spider bites and paper cuts, and wiped away tears. He'd survived. He was also crying. Crying, hunched over on the bed with his knees to his chest. Firefly. Keigo stepped out from the bathroom, tilting his head in concern. What's wrong? Touya let out a strangled noise, shaking his head. As desperately as he wanted to be held, to be taken care of, he still felt trapped in caretaker mode, managing everyone else, while shoving his emotions to the back of his mind, even as they spilled down his face like stardust. He couldn't get himself to just let go. Fuck, I feel so fucking exhausted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should be able to do this. I should be, but I... Hey, relax, Starburst. I've got you, warbled Keigo, voice full of affectionate worry. Touya shuddered, forcing his hands to move away from where they were gripping his knees, holding them out to his alpha in invitation. He felt Keigo take him in strong tan arms and draw him into his chest, bringing him close, kissing him lightly. Touya melted, letting soft hands brush away tears, smooth down ruffled hair, and hold him tight. Touya, look at me. Touya did. As always, there was nothing but warmth and devotion in those golden eyes. And as always, Touya was surprised. You did amazing, Keigo whispered, kissing his mate again. Touya, don't act like you're nothing. You're everything. Smiling, he chuckled lightly. I'm just Ken. Touya, despite himself, barked a strangled laugh. Stupid pigeon. Keigo's feathers fluffed indignantly. But he shook his head, wrapping wings around Touya and shielding them from the rest of the world. Touya clung onto him and hugged him like he was the only real thing. Like it was only the two of them, and nothing else had ever been real. I love you, he whispered, squeezing his eyes shut. I love you to the moon and back, and then a million miles more. Firework, I love you more than every star in the sky, Keigo promised, and Touya purred, feeling his heart crack as he fell in love with his husband once again. A feeling now as natural as breathing to his weary heart. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow things go back to normal.